Welcome to Thrive, your agency resource, the only podcast for creative, media, and technology leaders who are ready to dive deeper into conscious leadership and agency growth. I'm your host, Kelly Campbell. Thrive is brought to you by Accessiby, the leading web accessibility solutions provider. Join thousands of agencies that are already incorporating web inclusivity into their service offerings. Visit accessiby.com today. Hey there, I am so happy to have you back for this last episode of Thrive for 2022. I can't believe we've gotten here, but we have gotten here. Last time I talked with Caleb Clark about the people-first approach to agency leadership at his organization. And as we round out this year, today's conversation is going to be all about acquisitions. Khalil Stultz is a growth consultant and investor who knows a lot about acquiring agencies. And since I've also been through one myself, we've got a lot to talk about today. Khalil, a warm welcome to Thrive. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Hey, Kelly, thanks for having me.
So you have a super interesting origin story. We have some parallels in there, but I know you've kind of went from corporate to entrepreneurship. Talk a little bit about how that journey has been for you from, early days in corporate America to now acquiring agencies.
Yeah, for sure. It's been quite a journey. I actually started out in sales, in the transportation logistics space. So B2B sales. I was cold calling 150 calls a day for about 4 years straight. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, hence the gray hair here. So, but
I got you too.
Yeah, there you go. So, but yeah, I mean, did very well at it. Became a top 3% producer out of 100 sales reps in the office. Eventually became one of their sales trainers and sales coaches in the office. So I was one of those guys who could do it and teach it. Transitioned to the insurance industry. Also a top producing sales rep. I was with a leading insurance company that most have heard of here in the US. They have an office of about 1,000 sales reps here in Orlando. I performed in the top 3% once again, and also became one of their sales coaches. So again, some repeatable things, I was kind of producing, if you will, and kind of, packaging, if you will. But I started to get the entrepreneurial bug. Had a family at this time, wanted to build something for myself. And my thought process is like, okay, I'm great at sales. I'm making 6 figures as a sales rep, that sort of thing, which is great. But I always have to do that work.
Right.
Come next month on the 1st, I'm back at 0. Right. So when you kind of look at it in hindsight, it's like you put in effort and it's like, okay, what is that effort doing for me today? So that mindset started to take root and grow. I decided to dive headfirst and being an entrepreneur, as crazy as I was, I guess, having a family and so forth. Right. So my first attempt at being an entrepreneur was actually to try and buy a $7 million trucking company. So I swung for the fences. I'm sure you can imagine, Kelly, I didn't exactly have $1 million in my bank account after leaving my job. Go figure, right? To buy a $7 million company. But I decided to get resourceful. I tried to partner with someone who had bought companies before, bring him on as a credit partner to help fund this deal. So I had the industry background. It was a good fit. So it turned out that the deal was unfundable because the business owner had a divorce and a non-compete legal battle back to back. And he ran those legal expenses through his business, which I'm sure you can guess how banks feel about that.
Right.
So, we had a tough time trying to get it funded. So in essence, I wasn't able to come up with $1 million, but after kind of getting creative, being that was really my only option, I was able to add about $880,000 back to the company's net bottom line as cash, just from re-engineering the business, tweaking some things, negotiating with vendors without having to fire anyone, anything like that. And that's even prior to implementing any growth strategy. So, and that kind of catapulted me into a lot of things I do today, going on and partnering with companies, acquiring companies, implementing growth strategy, financial optimization strategy. But one instance that sticks out in particular in kind of this journey was my first marketing lead generation agency.
Yeah.
And I took an equity stake in a smaller one, doing less than 6 figures a year with a close friend of mine who had been, a marketing consultant, and he was just kind of wasn't able to really grow it the way he wanted to. So ultimately what happened was we grew it to about, 20 plus K per month, which is cool. But it got to a point where I was kind of like, look, we're continuously putting in this effort, and we all know that plateau as entrepreneurs that we hit every now and again, right? Sometimes for us, it's cyclical. It happens again and again each level we get to. But I started thinking, I was like, there's got to be a better way to, I don't like the short way. maybe some new entrepreneurs like me, like I like to skip steps. And I'm crazy enough to think that's
That's
possible.
literally the definition of an entrepreneur. Liking.
Right? Like exactly. Like I want to skip some steps here. Call it ADHD, what have you, but I want to kind of push my progress a little faster. So what I started to do was I started to transition from focusing just on marketing and sales to focus on growth through strategic partnerships, right? And that we grew 240% in a matter of 3 months, roughly. So we were starting to see exponential growth, right? But even then, like as amazing as it is, I'm like, okay, what's bigger than that? How can I get more bang for my effort? Really
Yeah.
was my thought process. So I kind of started to go back to what I started with, which was, wait, like I could sit here and keep trying to grow companies, which I'm great at, like lead generation, marketing, sales, financial. I could do all of that. I'm great at it. But like, what if I could grow a whole company at a time? Right? Think about that. So that was kind of my logic. So I finally came up with the idea, like I'm going to sell my agency, end up selling a majority stake in it, that sort of thing. And I'm going to focus just full head on in acquiring and optimizing companies. And that was that transition, that thought process that kind of got me here. It's like, look, whatever you focus on is what's going to grow.
Right.
At the end of the day, why not focus on the thing that's going to get me several steps ahead with each move, as opposed to the lower leverage tasks.
Right.
Which for most business owners, marketing, sales, obviously pretty important, right? But I started to realize it's not the best way to grow wealth. Best way to grow wealth, in my opinion, is growing a company at a time as opposed to a customer at a time. So that's kind of what got me there.
Yeah. Also, it sounds like your priorities or your goals were aligned with that, whereas an existing agency owner, their goals may not be aligned with that, right? So, but for you, this was what really was driving you. It sounds like.
Yeah, I might even beg to differ. I think, and maybe I am biased, but I really can't see a business problem that couldn't be solved with the right acquisition. I mean, you need to hire somebody. All right, why not find a company that already has the talent that you need, that's already profitable, that's already trained, right? You want more customers. Why not acquire a bolt-on solution that's already serving that same ICP? It's already profitable, right? You could very well double your company in a single transaction. It already has an additional audience base to serve that you can cross-sell your opportunities with.
Yeah.
Right? Grows the valuation of your previous business right off the bat just by acquiring that company. Again, maybe I'm biased, but I really couldn't see a business problem that couldn't be solved with the right acquisition. And quite truthfully, that takes less effort than sales and marketing.
That's an interesting point for sure. It's interesting because the person who acquired my agency back in 2016 thought exactly like you, right? Yeah. There was nothing that couldn't be solved through acquisition. Again, I think it does go back to what if your goal, your objective is not to triple your business, right? Then acquisition may not be right for you, right? And some people do want to stay with the smaller team. They want to service fewer clients, et cetera. So I just want to hold some space for some people whose their objectives are just not exponential growth in that way, which, there's no right or wrong. It's just what's right for you, right?
It works for you.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about acquisition because that's why you're here today. What kinds of things do you look for when you're thinking about acquisition, in terms of acquiring an agency or an agency like in the creative media technology space, like something from that standpoint? What makes one agency more ideal than another?
Great question. I personally definitely love to see opportunity for upside. So I love to see areas that are, I like to see a good business that has some areas that could be improved upon. Is a big thing for me. I like to create upside value. So that's huge, right? Some of those examples could be, hey, they got a whole data list or email list that they're not keeping warm. All right, there's some potential clients on that list. Typically, a few thousand, list. Could be some opportunities there if the right processes were implemented. Implementing a systemized customer referral program. Those are things that, if they're missing, that's opportunity for me. I also love to see a business that has systems and processes that can run without the owner. Right? Right?
That's a big one.
That's a big one. Like you don't want the business to fall over the moment the business owner steps away. And it's like you really don't have a business to sell. You you have your independent job as a self-employed
Right.
person.
You have a workhorse.
You have a workhorse, and last thing we want to do is pay a chunk of money for the workhorse to leave, and now the business falls over, right? So
Right.
that's not fun as a buyer. Definitely, some of those are some things that come to mind. Immediate, areas of opportunity for upside, as well as a business that is repeatable, right? That has repeatable processes that's not going to fall over when the previous owner transitions.
Did you know that 1 out of 5 people in the US is living with some form of disability? I'm proud to partner with Accessity as they work toward the mission of making the web accessible to everyone. It's time to prioritize inclusivity. Ensure that your own website and your client sites can be accessed by all and that they're ADA compliant. Head over to accessity.com/thrive to learn more about their agency partner program. Now, back to the show. So let's talk about the owner for a second, because I think this is probably, if I'm going to venture a guess here, I'm going to say that most agency owners that are listening to this or watching this are still in some way, shape, or form in the weeds. Maybe not in client work. Maybe you've gotten yourself out of that, but you're definitely handling the majority, if not all, of the business development, right? So talk a little bit about that. Like, what do you see as, if an agency leader is thinking about acquisition 2, 3, 4 years from now, right? Because you think about it all the time. Maybe I did.
Yeah.
4 years out, I started thinking about it. But what do they need to start extracting themselves from? Let's say, for example, if they're no longer doing client work, they've got that off of their plate, but they're also like really, really embedded in every other part of the agency.
Yeah, I would definitely say, obviously you mentioned a huge one: customer success, client support. It's a big one. Sales, big one, right? Again, even if, and I like to put, think of it this way: even if you're not considering selling your business right now, start looking at what the process entails, because that's going to open your eyes to a lot of things in the business that could be optimized. So that's definitely a way I look at it. But definitely the revenue generation activities. Hopefully those aren't reliant on the owner, right? Again, those are the type of things where, okay, hypothetically, if the owner is removed, then technically the sales stop, right? Not fun. So those are definitely some things we definitely want to ensure that a business owner is properly mitigating and has processes in place for.
Yeah.
Like,
I was just going to say, as a follow-up to that, how do you feel about an agency that's leveraging another agency, like an outsourced agency, to handle their business development, their lead generation?
That's a great question. I'm not opposed to it, me personally. I find that's different though between, some of my network of other investors. Some people aren't as favorable towards that because they want more control internally.
So they want more inside sales happening, but not the owner being the one that's solely handling that.
That particular piece is going to vary between investor preference, so to speak, from what I've seen. But yes, for the most part, I'd say so. For me, I don't mind an additional agency being utilized if there's a clear ROI that makes sense. Why not? Because that gives me leverage internally, so to speak. Less internal team I have to manage. If they're doing a great job, they know what they're doing, they can focus on that one thing. I'm okay with that, at least for a season. So I don't think that's big of a problem.
Got it. And do you ever, so let's say like you identify an agency, you start, working with them, and you realize that this is going to move forward. Do you also start working with the agency owner on communication to the team, letting the team know, hey, this is happening? How do we message this in a way that no one's scared that they're losing their jobs when the acquisition is going to happen, if that is true? How do you kind of navigate all of that? What do you advise them on?
That's a great question. I've seen this done in whether both ways. Here's what most companies do that sell in a retail fashion. Right? Most companies don't even tell their employees until it's done. Typically speaking, I can see the reason for that, because again, you can cause uproar and scare with your team, and they could get really frazzled, especially when something hasn't happened yet. What a lot of entrepreneurs do, and what I've seen, is that they wait to tell them when it's actually final and it's for sure. But typically speaking, it's not uncommon to kind of walk them through that process.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen the opposite side too, where former owners have made their team aware ahead of time that they're beginning the process to sell the company. This is rare, but it has happened where the team is fine. They're okay. They might be nervous, but they're okay and they want to stick around.
Yeah.
That's not normally the case in my experience, though.
Yeah, that was the case in my experience, but it was rare.
Yeah, I'd even be curious to hear how you navigated that. I've found a lot of times when people tell employees they could say, hey, you know what, I'm going to leave kind of thing, because they're kind of uncomfortable or afraid of what could happen with the new one. So I'd even be curious to hear how you navigated telling them.
Yeah. I won't go too far into the details, but I thought about transparency across the board, because there were 3 different options available to us in terms of who would acquire. And I said, hey, this is what's happening. I want you to look at all these different companies. It's going to be my choice, but it feels like, you've invested in me as much as I've invested in you. And I just wanted to be transparent. And I think that was the right move for me, because that was the culture that we had, so transparent communication. And then whoever wanted to stay would stay, whoever wanted to leave would leave. And I would help them get other jobs at other places. So
I love that.
Yeah. And trust me, I mean, it's been 7 years now. They have all their careers have skyrocketed. It's been amazing to watch and to continue to be a part of their lives. So it can happen. You say it's rare, but I think that the world is moving more toward transparent communication, which is great.
Yeah.
So that's great. So you do kind of advise a little bit about that, on that. For these agency leaders or owners or founders who are watching this, they're listening, they do have this in their head. Maybe they've had it in their head for a long time, or maybe this conversation is sparking that for the first time. What, aside from what we've talked about already, what are some of the things that they need to start considering these few years out?
Yeah, I'll put it this way. As business owners, there are certain forms of value that we should be aware of that we're creating when it comes to a business. There's, customer value, the things that we build to add more value to our customers, to incentive, that sort of thing. That's probably the one that most entrepreneurs are most aware of, right? Customer value. There's team value. What are the things you do within the company to add value to your team, to, optimize for them, that sort of thing. And the third one that most don't think about, in my opinion, is shareholder value, right? We spend most of our entrepreneurial journeys and career thinking about our customer. Many entrepreneurs aren't fortunate enough to build to where they have a team. So that's secondary, but even fewer entrepreneurs ever get to the point where they actually think about an end buyer and what's valuable to them. So I would say if you're ever walking down that path of considering acquisition, I start to think about those, really more in depth. Those 2, especially that last one, that shareholder value. How do you structure a business that adds value to a quote unquote shareholder, not just an owner manager? That form of thinking is going to open up a lot of perspective on what to focus on in the business. That's a great point.
And we'll leave it there. There's so many questions around this. I know we're sort of just the tip of the iceberg here, but in the show notes, we will have a link to your website and even your email if you're open to that, because I know that a lot of people will have questions. I was in this boat. I had tons of questions. I couldn't call enough other agency owners fast enough. So I really want to thank you for joining me today. I want to wish everyone happy holidays. Every single person who's been watching and listening over these however many years we've been doing this, really, really appreciate your support. And I will catch you next year for a whole new season of Thrive. Khalil, thank you again, my friend.
Thank you, Kelly.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you watch or listen. And a final note of gratitude to the official sponsor of Thrive, Accessiby, the leading web accessibility solutions provider. Learn more about the win-win proposition and keep your clients' websites inclusive and compliant. Be sure to check out their partner program for your agency today at accessiby.com/thrive.